a straightforward question. Who are the real monsters? The people who should, if this is a just, sane, rational world, have their reputations, their careers destroyed? Those who have supported and facilitated the mass extermination of potentially well over 100,000 people, most of them women and children, or the all too few with a public platform who have stood against this abomination? Which brings me, of course, to Furore over Bobby Vylan, the frontman rapper of Bob Vylan, and the chants he led at Glastonbury Music Festival, which I've just returned from, which you can probably notice. Let's just have a listen to those chants.
Free, free! Free, free! Free, free! Alright, but have you heard this one though? Death, death to the IDF! 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
This performance was live streamed on the BBC, as Glastonbury is each year, and it has led to an avalanche of outrage. It is splashed all over the front pages of newspapers. It is being extensively covered on news bulletins. The BBC is sending push notifications about it. The Prime Minister and his front benchers are lining up to express their disgust. There was even an emergency ministerial statement in Parliament about it. Keir Starmer, who continues to arm Israel's mass extermination of the Palestinian people, has declared there is no excuse for this kind of appalling hate speech. I said that kneecap should not be given a platform, and that goes for any other performers making threats or inciting violence. The BBC needs to explain how these scenes came to be broadcast. Kneecap, of course, are the Irish band being monstered for their opposition to Israel's genocide, with one of them being hauled before the courts in an absurd abuse of terrorism legislation. I watched them at Glastonbury, where they got a huge crowd and a raucous reception. Here's what isn't being splashed on newspaper front pages or dominating news bulletins or popping up on your phone as push notifications or leading a load of politicians to issue fiery condemnations or indeed leading to an emergency parliamentary statement by a minister. And it is just one example. A day before Bobby Vylan's performance, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz published a report headlined, "It's a Killing Field. IDF soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed Gazans waiting for humanitarian aid." For those who don't know, over 600 Palestinians in June were massacred as they queued for aid. They had no weapons, they simply had empty bellies. Now, the subheading of the article unpacks much of this. IDF soldiers and officers told Haaretz they were ordered to fire at unarmed crowds near food distribution sites in Gaza, even when no threat was present. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed, prompting the military prosecution to call for a review into possible war crimes. The newspaper goes on to say that Israeli soldiers in Gaza told Haaretz that the army has deliberately fired at Palestinians near aid distribution sites over the past month. Conversations with officers and soldiers reveal that commanders ordered troops to shoot at crowds to drive them away or disperse them, even though it was clear they posed no threat. According to one soldier, it's a killing field. Where I was stationed, between 1 and 5 people were killed every day. They're treated like a hostile force, no crowd control measures, no tear gas, just live fire with everything imaginable. Heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, mortars. Then once the centre opens, the shooting stops and they know they can approach. Our form of communication is gunfire. Here's a really crucial point being made by a reservist who just completed another round of service in Gaza. Gaza doesn't interest anyone anymore, he said. It's become a place with its own set of rules. The loss of human life means nothing. It's not even an unfortunate incident, like they used to say. Well, indeed. As this Israeli soldier notes, the lack of coverage by Western media outlets about the obscene crimes being perpetrated by the IDF every single day in Gaza allows this genocide to continue. An army which is imposing death to Palestinians as a practical course of action. The deliberate mass slaughter of civilians who have been deliberately starved by a state our government arms and allies with. You may ask yourself, what is more depraved than that? Yet here's just one crime in a litany of crimes which have been committed every single day by the IDF in 21 months of a relentless genocidal rampage. Yesterday, the IDF bombed a cafe where people were taking refuge from the heat, a place where journalists used Wi-Fi to upload their coverage. They murdered those journalists, as well as an artist, a footballer, and others. This story was deemed much less important than a chant about the IDF. That is, the army that didn't chant death to those journalists, or just chant, that artist, that footballer, but literally inflicted death upon them. We have watched the IDF commit every war crime under the sun. The mass slaughter of civilians, including entire extended families, including countless babies cooked to death or suffocated under the rubble or, yes, beheaded by Israeli weapons. The mass destruction of homes, schools, universities, libraries, mosques, churches, indeed any and all civilian infrastructure. The systematic destruction of an entire healthcare system, including entire hospitals and over 1,400 medics. Deliberate starvation, from a siege to the destruction of agriculture, livestock, food production. Relentless, forcible displacement. Mass enforced disappearances, otherwise known as kidnapping, torture on an industrial scale, up to and including rape, including doctors raped to death by Israeli soldiers using their rifles. It is this which should lead to a chorus of outrage condemnation by politicians and media outlets. But it hasn't. Instead, we're being subjected to far more outrage about the placards and banners belonging to opponents of genocide than about the actual genocide itself. Let's hear this, for example, on ITV's Good Morning Britain.
And let's just take a look at some of the footage from that performance on Saturday by Bobby Vylan. He led chants saying death, death to the IDF. That's the Israeli Defense Force. Now, he chanted this 5 times and he encouraged the crowds to join in and chant that back. He also chanted from the river to the sea. That's considered to be an anti-Semitic slogan, implying the eradication of Israel.
So the reporter said he also chanted from the river to the sea. That's considered to be an anti-Semitic slogan. By who? Is that just a fact? An objective fact? Here is a chant which, to the vast majority of people who chant it, means that all Palestinians between the river and the sea should be free. For me, it means a single state where all have equal rights between the river and the sea, regardless of their ethnicity or religion. Now, the Israeli state actually occupies the entire space between the river and the sea, where they have wiped Gaza from the face of the earth, while committing a relentless pogrom in the West Bank, where their leaders make clear that Israel will seize everything between the river and the sea for Israel. This is discussed, this slogan, so it's the erasure. It's like erasing Israel. Gaza has been erased in practice. It's not hypothetical. It's not you reading something into a slogan. It is a fact. It has been erased from the face of the earth. There is a single state in practice between the river and the sea, and it is Israel, which deprives the rights of the half or so of the population between the river and the sea who are Palestinian. This is gaslighting on an extreme scale. Avon and Somerset Police have just announced they're launching a criminal investigation into the performances of both the band Bob Vylan and Kneecap. We live in a world where those objecting to the genocidal actions of a foreign army are subject to criminal investigations, while those who arm that genocidal foreign army are not only free of criminal investigations, but continue to run the country. Meanwhile, Bob Vylan has been dropped by their record label, fitting with a general theme that those whose careers and reputations must be destroyed are those who are angry about genocide. The Mail on Sunday splashed with, now arrest punk bank who led death to Israelis chant at Glastonbury. This is a straightforward lie. No one chanted that, not a single person. They chanted death to the IDF, which is a foreign army committing genocide. The fact these people have to lie to make their case underlines the bankruptcy of their argument. These are the same ghouls who wail about cancel culture and free speech, who lie about what people said as they demand their arrest for words they never even said. Both Glastonbury and the BBC issued statements condemning Bobby Vylan for anti-Semitism. This is the latest example of the dangerous and irresponsible systematic campaign to strip anti-Semitism, a very real evil, of its meaning. It is actually anti-Semitism, in my view, to conflate Jewish people as a whole with a foreign army whose murderous actions have led to the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants for war crimes and crimes against humanity against Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defence minister. Bobby Vylan and his audience didn't chant what they chanted because they hate Jewish people. It's a lie, a straightforward lie to suggest this. These are ordinary people who have watched with growing levels of shock, disgust and horror as every single war crime under the sun is committed in a live-stream genocide by the IDF, maybe expecting that their rulers might share the outrage, but instead watching as their politicians arm that genocide and their media continues to justify and whitewash the crimes. A vacuum has been left, and it is no surprise it's being filled by the anger of ordinary citizens at the genocidal acts of a genocidal army, the IDF. Let's just take this as an example. In the 1994 Rwandan genocide, the Hutu militia, the Interahamwe, committed genocide against the Tutsi minority. If an artist during that genocide had chanted death to the entire army, would that be interpreted as hatred of Hutus or an expression of emotional disgust at the genocide against Tutsis? What do you think? And before pro-Israel cheerleaders say that's not the same, a consensus of genocide scholars, including those in Israel itself, have concluded that the IDF is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. There are two examples of armed forces committing genocide. Now, there's quite a remarkable irony I want to observe here. First off, I agree with calling for the death of the IDF as an institution. I want to make that absolutely clear. Everyone should agree on the basic principle that if an army commits genocide, it has forfeited its right to exist. It should be replaced with a military force which is capable of protecting the security, the rights and the lives of everyone who lives between the river and the sea, regardless of their ethnicity and their religion. In practice, I would imagine that would be a multinational peacekeeping force, certainly for an interim period. But this is the remarkable irony. Bobby Vylan and those joining in with the chant opposed sending the IDF into Gaza. If that had happened, not only would the mass slaughter and maiming and starvation and traumatising of so many innocent people have been avoided, but hundreds of IDF soldiers wouldn't have been killed. Who is really, in practice, calling for death to IDF soldiers here? Is it the people who sent them and supported sending them to their deaths? Or is it those who opposed sending them to kill and indeed, in the case of hundreds of them, be killed? This is the perverse irony. If it was the way of those, if those who chanted that had got their way, then all those IDF soldiers would not be killed. And yet they're the ones being condemned for saying death to the IDF. This firestorm indicts our society. Yesterday, the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, a utterly shameless, craven, pathetic politician, made a statement to Parliament about Bobby Vylan in which she spoke in the sort of solemn tone you might expect after someone had detonated a suicide bomb in a packed shopping centre. That's right, parliamentary time is being expended condemning a chant at a music festival about a genocidal foreign army rather than starving, unarmed Palestinians being deliberately mowed down on the orders of the IDF High Command. A society which concludes that a chant about a foreign army committing genocide should be the subject of a political and media firestorm rather than the mass extermination of innocent people is a society which is lost, which is morally depraved, which has been stripped of its humanity. If our species has a future and doesn't decline into outright mass violent barbarism, an open question right now, then history will look back at this period with shock and disgust and revulsion. The world has been turned upside down, where it's those who oppose genocide who must be monstered and destroyed rather than those who facilitated genocide. But you can only turn the world on its head for so long. One day there will be a reckoning. And those who were the architects of one of the most obscene crimes of our age will find themselves being held to account for what they did and what they said. It will be their reputations and careers destroyed, and in some cases they will lose their freedom after they stand in the dock charged with complicity in a genocide. Mark my words. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments, help us take on the pro-genocide media, which is whipping up a furore about people who are angry at genocide rather than those committing genocide. Help us take on that genocide media at patreon.com/OMJ84, and you make everything we do possible. Press like and subscribe, leave your comments, your thoughts. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Share the video. You can listen to this on the podcast as well. I'll speak to you soon.